If you're between the ages of 75 and 85 and you're still doing these 6 things every single day without even thinking about it, doctors say you belong to a genuinely rare group, a group that seems to be aging on a completely different timeline than everyone else their age. Stay with me until the very end, because sign number 4 might quietly explain memory slips you never connected to this. And there's a hidden 7th sign near the close of this video that most families completely overlook until it's too late. I'm Dr. William Lee, and after more than 3 decades in clinical practice, I've watched thousands of patients walk 2 very different paths after they cross 75. Some remain sharp, mobile, curious, and independent well into their late 80s and even 90s. Others begin a slow, quiet decline that families often mistake for simple aging, until suddenly it isn't simple at all. Today, I want to walk you through exactly what separates these 2 paths, because the difference is smaller and more reversible than most people ever realize. Here's what genuinely concerns me as a physician. Most people past 75 quietly abandon certain daily habits, telling themselves it's just getting older, that slowing down is inevitable and nothing can be done. But research following healthy elderly populations for decades tells a very different story, one where decline often isn't inevitable at all, but rather the accumulated result of small, invisible choices made one day at a time. Let's start with the first sign, and it's simpler than you'd expect. Do you still read printed books, magazines, or newspapers on a regular basis? Not headlines scrolled quickly on a phone, but real, sustained reading. Studies on what researchers call cognitive reserve consistently show that sustained reading actively engages the hippocampus, the brain's primary memory center, in a way that passive screen time and short-form video simply cannot replicate. In long-term aging studies, people who maintained a daily reading habit into their 70s and 80s scored measurably higher on delayed recall testing decades later than those who stopped. Second, do you still cook your own meals from scratch, choosing ingredients, following steps, timing everything correctly? This might sound like a small, ordinary task, but it isn't. Cooking demands planning, sequencing, working memory, and multitasking all at once under mild time pressure. These are exactly the executive functions that begin weakening earliest and most silently in the initial stages of cognitive decline. Patients who give up cooking, switching entirely to pre-made meals, or having food delivered often don't realize they've quietly removed one of the best natural workouts their brain had left. Now here's something most doctors won't say plainly, and honestly, it surprised even me the first time I saw the research laid out clearly. The third sign is far more revealing than most people assume, and I promise I'll explain exactly why in just a moment, because it connects directly to something happening in your legs and your brain simultaneously, right now, whether you've noticed it or not. Third, do you still walk without support most days, without leaning on walls, furniture, or a cane out of habit rather than necessity? Gait speed, how quickly and steadily someone walks, is now treated by geriatric researchers as seriously as blood pressure or heart rate. It's tracked, measured, and studied precisely because a slowing walk has repeatedly been shown to predict cognitive decline 2 to 3 years before any memory symptoms ever become noticeable. Your legs, in a very real sense, may be sending signals about your brain long before your memory does. Fourth, do you still remember phone numbers, addresses, or driving routes without leaning on GPS or written notes for every single trip? This taps directly into working memory, the mental workspace your brain uses to hold and manipulate information moment to moment. Losing this ability gradually, not suddenly, but slowly over years, is closely linked to declining levels of dopamine and acetylcholine, 2 critical brain chemicals responsible for focus, motivation, and sharp, reliable recall. When these chemicals drop, the earliest symptom usually isn't dramatic memory loss. It's simply forgetting small things a little more often than you used to. Stay with me here, because the 5th habit is the one my own patients are consistently most surprised by, and it has almost nothing to do with the brain in any obvious direct way, at least not the way most people would expect. 5th, do you still socialize regularly? Having real face-to-face conversations rather than brief texts or passive scrolling through social media? This matters more than most people assume. Chronic isolation has been shown to increase inflammation markers throughout the brain and body, and multiple long-term studies following seniors for 10, 15, even 20 years have linked persistent loneliness to a significantly elevated risk of dementia, in some studies comparable in magnitude to the risks associated with smoking. Conversation itself, the back and forth of real human interaction, forces the brain to process language, emotion, memory, and social cues simultaneously, an extraordinarily rich form of exercise most people never think of as exercise at all. Sixth, and perhaps the most quietly important of all, do you still sleep 7 or more hours most nights without relying on medication to get there? Deep sleep isn't just rest. It's an active biological process during which the brain physically clears amyloid plaque, the very protein most strongly associated with the development of Alzheimer's disease. Chronic poor sleep, even sleep that feels merely adequate, can allow this plaque to accumulate steadily over years, quietly raising risk long before any noticeable symptoms appear. Now, before I give you the complete picture, I want to share one more thing that almost nobody talks about, because I genuinely believe it may matter more than all 6 of the previous signs combined, so please pay close attention here. The 7th sign is subtle, and it's one I only fully understood after years of watching patients closely. Do you still notice and respond to small changes in your own body, a new ache, a slight dizziness, an unusual change in appetite instead of automatically dismissing everything as just part of getting old? Body awareness itself is a marker of an engaged, alert nervous system that's still actively monitoring and interpreting signals. Patients who dismiss every new symptom too quickly, assuming it's simply age, often delay diagnosis of entirely treatable conditions, sometimes for years, allowing small, manageable problems to quietly become serious ones. If you found yourself nodding along to most of these 7 signs, you're doing something increasingly rare and honestly remarkable for your age group, the kind of pattern researchers actively seek out to study because it doesn't match the statistical decline most people experience. But if you notice that 2 or more of these have quietly faded from your life over the past year or two, please don't panic. And please, whatever you do, don't finish this video feeling hopeless. I want to be absolutely clear about this. This is your body sending an early signal, not delivering a diagnosis, and it is absolutely not a sentence written in stone. Here's the part that genuinely gives me hope after decades of practice. The human brain retains meaningful plasticity, the ability to adapt, strengthen, and even rebuild connections, far longer into life than most people believe possible. Small, consistent adjustments applied steadily over months rather than days have been shown in longitudinal studies to measurably shift the entire trajectory of cognitive and physical aging. Walking just a little further each day, even if it starts with only an extra 5 or 10 minutes. Choosing one real, unhurried conversation over a quick text message. Protecting 7 hours of sleep as seriously as you'd protect any medication schedule. Cooking one meal from scratch a few times each week instead of relying entirely on convenience food. These aren't dramatic lifestyle overhauls. They're small, sustainable habits. And according to studies following seniors for decades, they consistently correlate with slower cognitive decline and greater independence later in life. I've personally watched patients in their late 70s and even early 80s partially reverse some of these warning signs, simply by rebuilding 2 or 3 of these habits with real consistency over just a few months. Their families often described it as watching them come back to themselves. The body, it turns out, genuinely wants to heal and adapt. It simply needs clear, consistent signals telling it that it's still needed, still capable, still worth maintaining. I also want to gently say this to anyone watching on behalf of a parent or grandparent right now. Sometimes the person experiencing these changes is the last one to notice them, or the most reluctant to admit them out loud. If something in this video reminded you of someone you love, that quiet moment of recognition matters. It's often the first step toward a conversation that genuinely changes the years ahead of them. Now I want to hear directly from you. Tell me honestly in the comments below how many of these 7 signs are still a real, consistent part of your daily life right now, today, not 5 years ago. Be honest with yourself. This isn't a test to pass. It's simply useful information. I read every single comment personally, and I'll be replying to as many of you as I possibly can over the coming week, because these conversations matter far more than most people realize. If this video helped you notice something you hadn't fully connected before, please take 30 seconds to share it with a parent, a grandparent, or even a spouse today. It genuinely could change how they experience the next 10 or 15 years of their life, and sometimes it's a single video like this one that starts that shift. Please subscribe and turn on notifications because next week I'll be revealing one specific morning habit, something almost nobody discusses openly, that's been quietly linked to noticeably faster brain aging. And I think it's going to surprise a lot of you when you see the research behind it.